and welcome to the second of our panels for this year's Frankfurt Book Fair. Don't worry if you can't make any of the others. The videos will remain available on YouTube and the audio on our podcast, so just search for Talking Through My Hat. Today, we are talking people. Is there such a thing as a career these days, and how do you build one if so? What changes are happening in our workplaces, and how do we make the most of them? And how do we address the fact that publishing business doesn't properly represent our country, our communities, and our readers? I'm John Pettigrew, recovering editor and CEO of We Are Futureproofs, where we build software to support skilled editorial teams. And I'm joined by a fantastic panel today. To introduce them in alphabetical order, Nancy Roberts is the founder of Umbrella Analytics, who use data and technology to overcome corporate bias and provide equality of opportunity at work. She also leads the technology and content team at Maverick, providing strategic and operational consultancy to publishers. So welcome, Nancy.
Thanks for having me, John. Looking forward to this conversation today.
And Suzanne Collier is the person to see if you want to get ahead in book publishing. The founder of bookcareers.com, she helps people every day of the year through all kinds of career challenge. She also hosts a weekly Book Careers podcast, as well as a job club to support unemployed publishers. She's a past winner of the Pandora Award and has been shortlisted twice by the Independent Publishers Guild for services to publishing, and by the CDI for her work on the Book Careers Salary Survey. Her book, How to Job Search in Book Publishing, will be released later in the year, and she describes her passions as careers, diversity, flowers, and Dagenham and Redbridge Football Club. So welcome very much to the podcast, to the panel, Suzanne.
Well, thank you very much, John, and thank you for putting the plug for the daggers in there.
So, to get to start us off, I'll ask each of you to just take a couple of minutes to kind of describe your stake in this question of employment, of careers, of publishing people in general. So we'll do it in alphabetical order again. So Nancy, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, I think, my stake, I guess, is as someone who had a career in publishing, left publishing, but I still feel very strongly that there's a lot of work to do around understanding careers in publishing and also conveying those and making sure that those are sort of appealing and appropriate for the kind of people that we want to attract. So I think, when I went into publishing, I didn't really have a clear sense of, what the career path might look like and what I might be doing in 5 or 10 years or anything like that. I just thought, books, that'll be lovely, and I'll work it out from there. And I think when you compare it to kind of more professional roles where there's a very clear and defined career path, we do have a challenge there. We need to be better at explaining to people where they could end up, what they might have the potential to earn, what types of roles might be out there as they progress in their career, and just selling it better as well as an industry, because I think there are lots of people who don't know about publishing as a career. As I include myself in that. When I was leaving university, it hadn't really occurred to me that publishing was a career that you could go and do. So I think we need to be better about kind of telling our story, which is ironic because it's something publishers should be very good at. But I think, my stake is also obviously around diversity because that's something I'm very passionate about. So I do want to encourage publishers to keep thinking about, how do we attract more diverse candidates? How do we create environments for diverse candidates to succeed? How do we make it a more appealing industry? How do we get more transparency about the industry and what you can do within it? All of those kind of questions, I guess, I'm also really passionate about. So hoping we can dig into some of those today.
Great. Thanks very much, Nancy. So, Suzanne, same question to you. What's your stake in careers and publishing people?
Well, I think my stake is very much on the side of the people who are working in the industry and who want to get into the industry, who, I describe myself as somebody that helps people who are looking for a job, building a career or wanting to succeed at work. And whilst from time to time I might work for corporates, doing redundancy counselling, the majority of the time I'm looking at things from the job seekers and the employees' perspective. And I see very, very fragmented schemes, some which could be described as tokenism because they're not actually making long-term impacts for change. They just might be a short-term internship. without actually giving diverse people a proper stronghold in the door. And I see no career pathway apart from somebody joining at the bottom and saying, well, the next logical step is so-and-so's job, but you need to wait until they leave or they're promoted. Particularly in the smaller companies. I know in the big five, at least, that there are clear career pathways, and now they've introduced mentoring schemes in-house, and they're very supportive of career development because they can see that staff retention can actually aid their profitability.
Great, thanks very much, Suzanne. So let's sort of get, as we're thinking about, publishing careers and kind of some of the stuff you were talking about, I'll ask you a question to start with, and ask you kind of, what is a career in publishing? I mean, has it changed over the years, and what do we mean now by a career in publishing?
If you're asking me what a career in publishing looks like at the moment, I'd say for the majority of us, a career in publishing looks very much the same as it always has, except that there were few, if any, roles advertised for the best part of 12 weeks. Some publishers have obviously had the rug pulled from under their feet, almost a complete loss of sales, particularly travel publishing, while others such as educational, academic or general trade may have performed better. It was interesting to hear that Nigel Newton of Bloomsbury said at the last IPG conference that with lockdown, they immediately lost 100% of sales. But when their results were released covering the first part of lockdown, I believe their turnover was up. If you relate lockdown to homeschooling and learning new skills and going back to traditional hobbies and interests, such as cooking, crafting and gardening, you can see why publishing overall has been relatively resilient to the pandemic. And career paths which may have veered astray are those relating to sales functions, where the primary customers are retailers without an online presence. And freelancers, I would say, have got a very difficult time too at the moment, because we know from past behaviour, whenever things take a downward turn, the first thing that usually gets cut is the freelance budget, which is ironic because the one thing that freelancers can offer is the work resource without the extra overheads that come with employing someone. Sadly, at the moment, I've seen job losses across the board. Since April, I've been running a Book Careers Job Club to support those in the UK book industry who've lost their job. But aside from the obvious suspects, that's things like Bertram's and Lonely Planet, the majority of participants are ones or twos from a wide different variety of companies.
Okay, that's great. It's really interesting. I mean, this exposure to risk really at the moment, isn't it, with the current situation? And I'm just intrigued. You mentioned this in your introduction of yourself, Nancy, and it's something I wanted to kind of raise, that you had a career in publishing and you had enough of that and went on to something else, and you got sucked back, at least in part. And I was wondering, what's it like trying to escape publishing, and why were you leaving behind something that you loved and being pulled back into it?
I think, like many things, it's often a kind of love-hate relationship that I have with publishing, because, I had a wonderful career in publishing and met some amazing people, met my husband, met many, many close friends. And I think publishing people are, generally on the whole rather lovely, and it's hard to kind of let that go because, obviously different industries have different cultures and different types of people. But publishing is always somewhere I felt, even though I'm not from a traditional background for publishing, I've always felt quite comfortable there. But I think, there was always part of me that thought, I'm not quite sure this is a real job. I'm not quite sure what a real career in publishing looks like. And of course, that didn't stop me from progressing and doing interesting things and having interesting roles. But I do still wonder, I wonder now what would attract people to a career in publishing when things are so much more kind of information is so much more available and different careers are so much more available. You know, there are jobs that didn't exist when I started in publishing. Some of those are in publishing and some of those are in technology companies, or, you know, they could, all sorts of different industries that now exist. And of course, people can craft a publishing career without ever going near a publishing company now. If they want to be a content creator on their own bat and self-publish material, they can kind of be their own publisher. So I think, you know, what's a career in publishing? I don't really know, but I think we need as an industry to have a better answer to that if we're going to get really bright, smart people to keep coming into this industry, which is something we've historically been very good at. But as Suzanne said, we need to recognise that the current situation is making it very, very hard. And, you know, there is a chance that some people are going to think this industry is too volatile and too risky, and they don't have a clear enough sense of direction, and maybe we'll lose some of those people to industries which seem to have a better grip on how we're going to pull through the crisis and what their career path might look like. So I think there's some questions for us to think about there as we go through this period, as Suzanne was saying.
Yeah, and just to kind of, you were kind of mentioning this a little bit, Suzanne, as well, and picking up from what Nancy was saying, that, you know, you've been seeing a lot of people, ones and twos, come from here and there, and different companies and different sectors are being hit. But have you noticed any particular groups of people that are suffering the most at the moment and having the most problems?
I would say that the people who've been hit the hardest by the situation are those wanting to enter the industry, particularly those who left education this summer. A recruitment freeze across so many publishers at the beginning was difficult. But there's been some signs that over the past 8 weeks, there's been a definite increase in the number of roles advertised. But that's really where it is difficult. And Nancy mentions this slightly, and it is this lack of career pathway that really harms publishing from saying that it's a great career industry to work in. You know, that you're not just going to have an entry-level job and maybe a second job and then flounder because there's no jobs above you, but they're actually going to be some clear pathways. But I also think that with the UK government doing this kickstart plan for 6 months internships, those that are wanting to enter the industry might be helped out by seeing some more publishing internships over the next few months. The internships might only be paying the national minimum wage, but these are new and additional opportunities. And I'm even hoping to be recruiting for an intern to join us at Book Careers, which is about brand new opportunity.
Yeah, that's kind of really interesting, isn't it? That even bringing interns into small businesses which wouldn't traditionally have used internships. I do find this entry, how you get into the publishing business, kind of always been kind of interesting to me. I mean, I ended up slightly oddly in publishing because I just realized that I like being nerdy about words as a scientist. I didn't like the lab work, I liked the words, and that's very unusual. So I thought, but it still took a long time to get my first publishing job. It was like 9 months, which was a long time back then in the 90s. And I didn't give much thought to career path. I just thought, hey, that's something I want to do right now. But I did find within not very many years that I was getting frustrated because as an editor, which is what I was trained as a desk editor, that the only career path offered to me was to become a commissioning editor. And I had absolutely no desire to be a commissioning editor. I wanted to be a desk editor, but just more of that. And this construction of careers and career paths in publishing is slightly odd because the assumption is that the step up is to do something completely different to what you do, which is sort of kind of strange to me.
Yeah,
I mean, Nancy, is this part of the thing that you had?
I just wanted to respond or sort of like riff off that a bit, because the other thing that I think that we see in publishing, and Suzanne, I know you and I have talked about this a bit in the past as well, but the other thing that you often see is, as you say, people are in a job that they really enjoy and they're really good at. And then what happens is someone goes, oh, right, you should be a manager and here's your team. And there's no kind of support given on how to manage people, what management actually is. I mean, I know people in publishing who don't really believe management's a thing. You know, they think it's a kind of like a made up concept made up by business schools and stuff. So you get all these people, and, you know, I was the same. I was given a team, like, here you go, just manage this team. I'm like, I don't know what that is, right? I don't know how to, do appraisals. I don't know how to have those difficult conversations. I don't know, I don't know how to emotionally support a team when they're going through a difficult time. And I think, again, it's something that I do a lot of training around, and I definitely am seeing a change in that, a positive change in that companies do want to start training people a bit more to understand what management skills are and to be better equipped to handle this kind of situation or any kind of difficult situation. Obviously, at the moment, we're in a very extreme one, but you need strong management at this time, particularly when everyone's working remotely and you're not seeing your colleagues and there's lots of rumor and what's going on and who's going to lose their jobs and all this stuff. It really requires good people skills. And actually, we're not very good at training people into that. So, I think there's also a sense of, a career path in another industry, you would have that progression of like you build those interpersonal skills, you get training and support, and then you take on management. We do it the other way around, where we kind of throw a team at you and then expect you to figure it out. And again, we need to consider that, because not, like you said, John, not everybody who's really, really good at the functional roles necessarily wants to be a manager anyway, because it can, it's quite hard and it can be emotionally draining, and it's a different skill set. But equally, if people do want to do that, we have to give them the skills and the training and support to do it, rather than just assuming because they were a really good editor or a really good production person or a really good salesperson, they're naturally going to be really good at managing a team, because it's actually a very different world and a very different skill set. So I think there's, talking about that career path thing, we need to be a bit clearer about those different routes. Maybe you don't want to people manage, that here's your route and here's your progression. Maybe you do want to people manage, we need to give you therefore some training and support to do that. So I think we definitely want to see more of that, particularly as Suzanne said, as we're going through this really difficult time and people are going to need a lot of emotional support from their managers. We need to make sure we've got people who can do that.
Yeah, that certainly reflects my experience. Is there a connection, do you think, between, let's be really crude about this, money and promotions and career path? Is it just because publishers don't want to pay people who are senior? They want to keep you either do a junior job or you become a senior person and become a manager. Why should we not have highly skilled people recognized and promoted for that? Is that something we need to design in? I think, Suzanne, you want to have a quick go at that?
Yeah, I'm totally on board with what Nancy says. Totally on board. Is that you see that, and often the kind of people I sometimes get who are stuck or unhappy in their job is they know they've been promoted above their level of competence, or they know they've been promoted to a point where they're spending all their time in board meetings and doing all the stuff that their boss used to protect them from, and quite frankly they want to take it back a level and have all the fun without all the aggravation and all the stress. I think too, as an industry, something I wanted to say is why you look at other industries and you see assistants who are mid-career, that they might have been doing an assistant level job for 5 or 10 years and be really happy with that. Yet for us as an industry, all the assistant level roles are all entry level now, which is great because I don't want to knock anything or pull things back so that there's even fewer entry level jobs than there are at the moment, but we've got to start looking at things differently. Whereas because I know we're going to come on to building teams, that where you're building a team, that sometimes the backstop of a team, an assistant, it could help to give continuity to a whole team rather than the continuity being at director level or senior level. But I think it's really important that we recognize this as an industry, because people want fulfillment at work. And yes, I do think that money plays a big impact in lack of promotions as such. However, in the Book Careers Salary Survey, what we often see is that people are given job titles in lieu of pay rises. And that's really common across the whole of the industry.
Yeah, that's I know I've seen that happen as well. So I want to kind of move us on a little bit to one side. One of the things that Nancy's touched on, and I I found, I mean, I'm kind of aware, bringing this whole topic up, I'm a white middle-class cis man, and I was slightly uncomfortable coming into publishing because I'm a northerner. That's my one bit of diversity. And I found it slightly odd in this, being in the south of England, in this very wine-based culture, even at entry level. It was kind of, there was that kind of expectation. And we're very bad as an industry at representing the country, at representing the people who read our books. Particularly, I mean, I've worked most of my career in academia and in academic publishing and in education, where by definition, those things are supposed to reach everybody. And in fiction is the same. And we have general fiction and black fiction and women's fiction, as though general fiction isn't, it's this mainstream concept. How do we address the fact that our teams don't properly represent our communities by geography? We're so southern based, by class, by race, by gender. We're very female dominated, except at management level. I mean, how do we kind of address that stuff? And I guess, Nancy, this is kind of your wheelhouse really these days. I mean, do you want to take a first spin at that? I mean, it's a big question.
It's a big question. Yeah. I mean, I think, feeding a little bit off what Suzanne said earlier, what concerns me is when I see initiatives that are not really well thought through. We'll have a diversity internship. Now, again, I don't want to knock the people being given that opportunity, and for the people who get that opportunity, that's brilliant, but it is tickling at the edges of a much bigger problem, and it's not really solving the systemic issue. So again, I think, the reality is at the moment that publishing is very white. It's extremely white, and simply bringing in graduate interns is not going to solve the problem, because what their experience is going to be is probably quite negative. Because if you felt awkward being a northerner, and I'm a northerner as well, even though I don't sound like one anymore because publishing beat my accent out of me quite early on, but imagine how you would feel if you're the only black person in a publishing company. I mean, I speak a lot to employee resource groups and people who work in their kind of black network in their organization, and they do say, every time there's a new piece of corporate publicity that gets recorded, I get wheeled out as the kind of token black face, or every time it's Black History Month, I have to read all the press releases, even though I work in sales or production or something completely unrelated. There's this kind of like, almost like we've let you in, but you're not really part of the gang. Like you're still a little bit out to the side. And I think, again, to address that, we've got to look more laterally at how we recruit. Not just looking at, this person's been in this assistant level role for 2 years, let's promote them into an executive role or the next step up. We need to say, actually, marketing skills exist in all sorts of industries, and you can learn the books bit, right? It's all the underlying principles of marketing or of operations or of strategy are the same. Yes, of course, it's an advantage to know an industry, but you can learn that pretty fast in most cases. What we do is not that magical. It has its nuances and its quirks, but it's an industry like any other. So we need to think about not just creating entry-level roles to try and get diversity in, but we need to look through the organization. We need to look at senior roles and say, how do we get people into these decision-making roles? Because that's the issue, right? Who's making decisions about how money gets spent? That's when we'll see the industry change. We're not going to see it change by bringing in lots of entry-level people. It will eventually, if some of them stay, but it's a very long game. Whereas if you have decision makers, so commissioning editors, people who own a marketing budget, people who own, commissioning budgets, if those people have more diversity in them, we will see a big change, because they'll go after different books, they'll go after different markets. And there's huge potential from, setting aside the moral case around all of this, there's huge business potential there, because there's huge markets who aren't being served, as you said, this ghettoizing of kind of women's fiction and black fiction and queer fiction and stuff. Why can't I read all of that? Why is it marketed in such a way that makes it very, very kind of ghettoized? And I think I'd really like to see companies, when they have senior appointments, just thinking about what are the skills and competencies that this role requires, rather than how long has this person worked in publishing? Because that's a classic publishing thing. You've been in publishing for 10 years, you must know this person and this person and this person. Yeah, I do, but does that make me the best person for the job? There could be someone out there who's a brilliant marketer or a brilliant commissioning editor or, a brilliant, I don't know, salesperson from another industry who would bring something very different, and they wouldn't come with that legacy of we've always done it this way. And I think I'd really like to see companies think more up and down the organization and across the organization, rather than just saying we'll get some entry level internships in and that will kind of help us solve the problem. And again, absolutely in favor of us having those schemes, but there needs to be a holistic picture, as Suzanne was saying. It needs to be thought through the whole organization, not just kind of let's get some assistants in and you know, then hope for the best sort of thing, because that's not going to work.
Yeah, that's oh yes, we want to improve our diversity, so we will include junior people, and then in 20 years time we'll have a diverse team. You know, that's just a ridiculous way of thinking, isn't it? And it's because the top is so white and straight and male, because they're the ones making those decisions. But it's that, and as we were saying earlier, you know, you can have an internship that brings in people from a different background, but if they're not at home, why would they stay? And they don't. The data shows that. I know. So how do we build a culture that that actually does include everybody and does enable us to genuinely recruit across the board? I think, Suzanne, do you want to pitch in on some of that?
Yeah, I think one of the problems is that we instantly segregate ourselves from different areas of publishing, that we, you know, that publishing is for all, and publishing is for everybody, and that's careers, that's authors, for books that we read, books that are written. But what I see is that we find these little divisions where we feel comfortable with people, and we really need to come out of our comfort zones in certain things. I do think one of the best things about the improvements that are being made to increase diversity include blind recruitment. I think that not knowing somebody's name is really, really important in an application, because the previous incarnation of the Book Careers Job Club, I kept asking myself why the people, I mean, we're talking 10 years ago, I had people in the Book Careers Job Club who had digital skills, yet they were unemployed the longest. Because why? You know, but it was quite obvious that the people who were unemployed the longest were those that had ethnically diverse backgrounds. And I find that difficult. And I find this, if I look at any of my inclusivity stats, is that what I do is I have quite an inclusive business here, and that I'm quite open to all. But when I see brilliant clients who should be getting jobs, not getting jobs for what I call minor misdemeanors, or being picked up, or even worse, losing a job because of a minor misdemeanor, where somebody, it might not, you know, somebody else might not have been picked up on that. I find it highly, highly frustrating, and actually really rather dangerous. But I do think we're moving in the right direction. But as Nancy says, publishing, we're also precious in publishing. You know, somebody asks me, I mean, I do a careers clinic every week. I mean, I can't even tell you, I think I've spoken already this year to over 400 people in the career, all giving them free 15-minute chats about the career in publishing. And they're asking me what's the mystery. And I'm just saying, look, publishing is basically up its own backside, in that a publishing job is the same as a job in another industry, except you're working on books. Instead of marketing frozen peas, you're marketing books. And okay, you're not working with frozen peas, you're working with real live authors and real life people. But if you can market one thing, you can market another. You know, and we've seen this, and we really need to get off our high horse. And just on the inclusivity stakes, because we've got, you know, you both said you're two northerners, is I actually started in publishing at the age of 16. So I just having local comprehensive school education. Obviously, I've since got NVQ level 6 in my maturity, but for the majority of my publishing career, I've often been the most uneducated person working in the office.
Yeah, that demand you see in so many jobs must have a degree. And thinking there is no need for someone in that position to have a degree. You can find better people earlier, particularly if you want to pay them very little, you can get them younger. Very perverse.
Yeah, and
but
as you say, again, like a lot of companies are saying to me, oh, we've removed the requirement from a degree from our job adverts. And I'm like, yeah, but have you actually got hiring managers who still don't look for degrees? Because it's all very well not putting it in the job advert, but if you're not, I know that there are still commissioning editors out there who will not recruit someone who doesn't have a degree from a good university. I know it. They tell me, they're not ashamed of it. So, taking the requirement out of the job adverts is a good first step, but again, back it up.
Yeah, and that degree requirement thing, it's that difference between theory and practice is really important. That's where culture lies, isn't it? That you can say, oh, well, we don't do this, but if culturally that's what you do, you've got to have an Oxbridge degree to get into this kind of company or something. There's something very exclusionary about that just intrinsically, and that is unhealthy. Suzanne, you wanted to pitch in on the degree thing.
Yeah, from my experience and my knowledge of working with people who are looking for jobs for so many years, is what I would actually say is that traditionally publishing didn't need a degree. Maybe because they didn't put the degree requirement, maybe because most of the people looking for jobs in publishing were English graduates. However, in the 1980s, when publishing started to get too many applicants for jobs, I mean, I've been on this careers bandwagon for an awful long time. The one way that publishers found to reduce the number of applications was to say must have a degree, so that they could, and this is the thing, we haven't, whilst the diversity issues might be being worked on and might be being we for over so many years, this industry has shot itself in the foot, so to speak, because the publishers don't want to deal with hundreds of applications. I mean, and you look at, there was a Penguin editorial assistant recently, which I think got over 1,400 applicants. And I've seen how they're going through for their next round of editorial assistant roles, and they're actually doing something quite clever to reduce the number of applicants, but also to filter out applicants that don't have the qualifications, or not the qualifications, but the skills and competencies, because all recruitment must be done on skills and competencies every time, and this doesn't mean you can't do some sort of positive recruitment schemes, but you have to think about how that reflects on your own business and your own diversity. If you're excluding someone somewhere, you are not necessarily being helpful to the whole diverse landscape. You really need to focus on the skills and competencies, so that to reduce the number of applicants, they used to say, okay, we're just going to do a degree in publishing, and then it went from, okay, we're only going to recruit people who've done a master's in publishing. And then they look at their businesses and wonder, wow, we've got a whole company full of people the same. And even though somebody might come from a diverse background, they think the same as us rather than question and challenge. And we as publishers have to be questioned and challenged, because what we're publishing is meant to reflect what's happening in the world, but also what might happen in the world next.
Yeah, and I wanted, again, just to sort of wheel back to this question of degrees. That was really interesting to hear that, Suzanne, about how that came about, because the thing that strikes me is, I was lucky enough to graduate university. I was the first generation in my family to go to university, and I was lucky enough to get a grant and some support from my parents, not a lot because they couldn't afford a lot, but enough to enable me to go, and a maintenance grant, and my fees paid by the local authority. So I was lucky enough to leave university without a huge amount of debt. I mean, I certainly needed to go and get a job, but it was manageable. And now we're looking at students paying £9,000 to £12,000 a year fees. There's no way I could have done that. I would not have gone to university if that was the situation now, because my parents couldn't have afforded it, and nor could I. And I do think we need to be really mindful of the impact that pipeline has on our industry, because if we continue to expect people to have degrees, even if we're not explicitly saying it, but there's a kind of unwritten assumption that those are the people that we want, we are going to exclude anyone who doesn't come from a wealthy family. And that's the problem we've got right now. As Suzanne said, everyone looks the same, everyone thinks the same, because everybody went to private school and Oxford and Cambridge and all of those things. And those are all good things to do, but it is very limited. It's a very thin layer of society that's in that category, and it's going to become thinner, because if I was 19 now and considering my life choices, I'd say sod university, I'm going to go and get a job in a startup, or I'm going to go and get a job, like Suzanne said, I'm going to get a job where I can learn and develop and just start earning some money. And to be honest, asking someone to leave university with 50 grand's worth of debt, start to rent a property in central London, and then earn £23,000 a year, that's not sustainable for anyone who doesn't have financial support. And I mean, Suzanne and I talk on Twitter about this all the time, obviously, but the sums don't add up, right? The sums just simply don't add up. It's a fact that you cannot pay off a student loan of 50 grand, rent a flat in London where you'll need to be because that's where the office was. Although again, hopefully we'll see that changing as a result of kind of more remote working. But historically, most of the jobs are in London, Cambridge, Oxford, Edinburgh, big expensive cities to live in. And then you're being paid buttons. We've got to square that circle somehow. We've got to either pay people better or be more open to people who don't have academic backgrounds and who maybe want to study later in life, who might be prepared to come in and work for 5 years and then think about doing a degree later in life. Because like I say, I wouldn't be in publishing if I was 19 now or 22 now. I just wouldn't have been able to afford it. And we cannot be an industry that it's a luxury for people to go into. Yeah. It's got to be sustainable.
Yeah. And that takes us neatly to a subject I kind of wanted to address, which is money. And one of Suzanne's claims to fame is the publishing salary survey that she started and has been so illuminating to many people. And I wanted to, you started this quite a long time ago. Why did you start doing that survey? And, do you think it's been useful over the years, and in what ways?
Yeah. So I started, the first salary survey I did was in 1996, when I was chair of the Society of Young Publishers. And what actually happened is we had a stand at the London Graduate Careers Fair, and somebody came up to me and said, I've just been offered a job at the book publishers, and bearing in mind this is a graduate careers fair, they were looking for other jobs, and they said they're offering me a salary of, and I don't know whether this is a good salary or not. And I was like, oh my God, because at the time I think it was 13,000, which was about £1,500 more than most of the salaries that I knew about. And that's when I just got the idea for doing a salary survey. And for a few years I did it while I was still chair of the SYP, chair for more years than anybody is ever allowed to be chair, I should add. I then, when I stood down, I took the salary survey with me because it had become so contentious, like back in the 1990s, like anybody in publishing talked about salaries. Oh my God. I mean, when the first report was published, there were rows across the pages of the bookseller between Philip Cogan and myself because he accused us of inflating some of the figures. It was like, no, these figures are wrong. They're not too low, they're too high, as though to put pressure on his company. Cogan Bay's a fabulous publisher, and I have such a good friendship with Philip and Helen Cogan. What I was going to say is that it's really good to see campaigns like Book Job Transparency now. And I mean, next year, we postponed the salary survey this year, and next year it is planned, and that will be the 25th year. The 25th year, I think it's 25 years since I first started gathering salary survey data. And I actually think that might be the moment, that might be my last survey, because so much transparency. Oh no, Nancy's saying no. I'll see how it goes, because it is it's the best and worst of experiences doing a survey of that data with that amount of responsibility in that sort of time frame. You know, I've always said the survey will be the death of me, and hopefully it won't. One year it nearly was, but that's another story. But it's this thing where now when I talk about salary survey, people are saying, when's it coming out? Like Nancy's going, no, don't stop. When's it coming out? You know, and the publishers do rely on it for benchmarking now, because, and it's really interesting to see that over the years there are very little differentials between the different sectors of publishing across the roles. That if I analyze, say, an editorial assistant for an academic publisher salary, it's not different to that in trade or education. And I think that really in a way helps the industry too. I guess what I love about the survey is that you cannot make a career decision, an informed career decision. All my work as a careers advisor is based on informed career decisions, and you cannot make an informed career decision without the proper data. And that's what I think I like to provide. What is good is over the years how I've seen it influence certain things. So back in 2013, I think it was, that we noticed that the entry-level salary since the previous survey had only gone up 2.2% or 1.7%, while the overall median salary had gone up something like 23%. And at that point, back in 2013, the starting salary, I think average starting salary was £17,700. And the publishers instantly reacted to that. And that is when Penguin was the first, I believe, to bring in an entry-level salary for, you know, I think then it was 21,500, that they instantly started reacting. And that, I mean, Nancy produces data. Nancy's whole job is based around data. And I think that just shows the reaction that publishers have to good quality data really shows how it can make an impact on the industry as a whole and make us a better industry.
Yeah, data is, I think, knowing what's going on, which is all we mean by data, is so important. And I think I wanted to throw in a question over to Nancy here, because obviously one of the things that's happened with pay data in recent years, and I know has spurred some of your recent career moves, is the government's mandate on pay transparency by gender. It may be too early to say, I don't know, but do you think that the government's moves to encourage transparency in pay, A, are working? And are they actually helping to achieve the ends they want to with them?
I think, I mean, as Suzanne said, you know, transparency is critical to all of this. You need to have the information, you need to know. And, you know, again, going back to some of the diversity conversations, we know all of the research tells us that, you know, women will be disadvantaged in pay negotiations. People from ethnic minority backgrounds will be disadvantaged in pay negotiations. So if a salary is not explicit and it's pitched as negotiable, the white guy will do best at the end of that process. The data tells us. Yes, of course, there's going to be exceptions, but statistically, the white guy is going to end up with the top in that negotiation if all other things being equal with the candidates other than their gender and race. So, you know, pay transparency is a critical way of tackling that. It should not be about what the person can get away with asking for. It should be about what the role is worth to the organisation and the skills and competencies that person brings, as Suzanne was saying. So or, you know, the research shows that pay transparency is critical in tackling these inequality questions. And the more that we know, the more empowered we feel to negotiate our salary and not be afraid of the consequences of that, and to have data to say, well, I know that these people are earning more than me, or that this role is, you know, typically paid at this level. You know, that is a very different proposition from just trying to convince someone to give you a bit more money. I think, you know, the gender pay legislation, you know, it's a blunt tool. It definitely needs work. The legislation needs more teeth, but it's got to be the right direction to go in. And, you know, I would continue to push for more things like that. So I think we should have ethnicity pay transparency. I think we should be looking at pay differentials between the highest and lowest paid in different industries, and we should be looking at, you know, capping that or having some kind of oversight into that, where shareholders might be able to say, hang on a minute, you know, the CEO is getting paid 400 times the average salary. You know, do we really believe that that's the right thing to do for this organization? Is the CEO worth more, 400 times more, than the person on the factory floor, or the person in the production office of the publisher, or whatever it might be? And I think, you know, public pressure is very powerful in that regard. And I think people have picked up a lot of stuff from the gender pay data and started asking questions. And, you know, it's a long process. I think it was unfortunate that the legislation was suspended this year. I think that was a backward step in all sorts of ways. And of course, what we've seen in the pandemic is women being more affected because they're doing childcare, they're doing homeschooling, they're often doing parental care, and you know, all of those things, and trying to keep their career, whereas men typically, you know, again, the data tells us, typically are more likely to just be getting on with their job and not really worrying about all of this other pandemic related stuff that's happening. So I think, you know, I would like to see the gender pay legislation evolve. I'd like to see people who don't submit their data be punished properly financially, because up to now that hasn't happened. They've been warned and they've been held, you know, they've been named and shamed, but fundamentally hit them where it hurts and, you know, give them a fine, then they'll start reporting. And as soon as they start reporting, they'll have to start making changes, because people will vote with their feet. You know, people will not want to work in an organization that they don't think is being fair. So, you know, I'd like to see a lot more of that. I think it's a great start, and I think it's the right direction. But we definitely need to keep pushing to get more granular data, more different types of lenses onto that data, and more teeth around what we do when we think that data is telling a bad story.
Yeah, okay, great. Well, we're kind of running out of time here, so I just want to ask you both to look forward a little bit. We've talked about some of the issues that we're having with our careers, with the industry, but what might the future look like? What would you like to see? Or if you prefer, where might we end up that we don't want to be? And you know, and if it's somewhere you want to be, how do we get there? And if it's somewhere you don't want to be, how do we avoid it? So I think, Suzanne, do you want to take a first picture of that? Where could we go and how might we get there?
Well, I think wherever we're going, it's a better place than we have been in. I think that we're all alert to we're all alert to diversity, inclusivity, and pay at all levels. We've all become very woke on this, and that in relation to publishing can only be a good thing. I think what I'd love to see is, I'd love to see more jobs, but I know we're a small industry, and this is sometimes what people find it difficult to understand, and it's something that I talk about a lot to people wanting to come into the industry. So UK teaching probably employs about 500,000 people employed as teachers. Book publishing as an industry in the UK is something like between 35 and 55,000 people. We're not a huge industry. There aren't a huge amount of jobs, but I'd like to see some definitive career planning, and that includes mid-career planning, because I get a number of clients who by age 35 are disillusioned with the industry, and they come to me and sadly say, Suzanne, can you get me out of publishing? What else can I do? And I'm like, oh, I'm always floored, but I'm not, wouldn't say floored by it, but I do help them resolve the career issues and help them with alternative pathways. But I think but we have to understand that not everybody can be a manager, and not everybody wants to be a manager. So we need to think about what skills and competencies are best for a publisher in each role, regardless of age, regardless of ethnicity, wealth, social class, or education. That's what we need to do, and that way we can build great companies.
That's great. Thanks, Suzanne. And Nancy, where do you think we might go, and how might we help ourselves get there?
I think, I'm going to take the positive route, and again, agree with Suzanne that we're heading in a better direction than where we've come from. I think I'd like to see, this has been a god-awful year for everybody, and I'd like to see us try to build on some of the positives that have come out of the current situation. So, I've spent years telling publishers that it's completely possible to work from home, and being told that it isn't. And guess what? We've made it work. It's not perfect. It's not the way we maybe would have wanted to do it. And, it certainly, has raised lots of challenges, but we've kept going as an industry with no notice when we just had to all work from home. So I think there's a lot of positives we can take from that. Firstly, we're more resilient than maybe we gave ourselves credit for. But secondly, also, we need to think about just breaking down some of these conceptions we have in our own head about what a job is. And we started very early on in this conversation talking about freelancers, and we are an industry that is absolutely dependent on our freelancers. They're the, in many ways, they're the lifeblood of our industry. They're often very experienced people who've then, taken a freelance career because they want more flexibility, they want more time at home, they want to do different things, but they have huge skills. And I think we've always undervalued that. And again, I'd like to see us come out of this situation thinking, well, actually, having flexibility, having people who can work on a project and then maybe they go off and do something else might be a really positive thing for us, rather than having somebody in a job doing the same thing 365 days a year. Maybe it will bring fresh ideas and fresh ways of thinking into our industry if we think in a more kind of project way, or in a more team-based way where you pull together a team to get certain things done, and then maybe those people go off and do different things. And again, that gets us out of this kind of hierarchy where the only way to get up is to wait for someone to die or retire, or and then you get their job but you don't really know how to do it because you've never really learned how to manage or anything like that. So I think we need to just start thinking very, very differently. Do people need to be in-house? Who needs to be in-house? Where do freelancers fit, and how do we treat them fairly as part of our company, which very often they are? And at the start of the pandemic, freelancers were really drifting. There was no financial support from the government for a long time, and a lot of companies, as Suzanne said, the first thing to go was the freelance budget. And as an industry who's relied on that workforce for as long as I've been in publishing, it's not cool to just cut them loose when things get tough, and we need to be more responsible about that. But equally, we need to see the opportunity of people working in different ways. So I'd like to see, as an industry, getting rid of these silos where you're in production and you stay in production for your whole career, or you're in editorial and that's what you do. I'd like to see that kind of skills-based thinking that Suzanne was talking about. So what does this person bring, and where might that have value somewhere else in the organization? Maybe they'd be a great manager, but maybe not. Maybe they'd be great working on this technology project or on this new product development or whatever. So just kind of being a little bit less rigid and thinking a bit more laterally about the fantastic resource that we have, which is tons and tons of really engaged people. And I would say, I think the people in publishing, almost everyone I've ever met, is incredibly passionate about publishing. So we've got the good human capital there that we need. We just need to be better at creating opportunities for it to thrive. And I hope that the pandemic has opened that up a little bit and opened people's thinking up a little bit to think, actually, there's more than one way to run a publishing company. It doesn't have to be a glitzy office in central London with, everybody dressed the same and coming in every day with their Pret coffees and stuff. There are different ways that we can achieve the outcomes of publishing. And I'd like to see us kind of build on that, I guess.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Nancy. And thanks to both of you. I think that's been illuminating and inspiring as a conversation. It's great. So, but now is the time that we are going to head over to Twitter and do a little bit of Q&A. If anyone has any questions for Suzanne or Nancy about these questions, come over to Twitter. The hashtag to follow is Talking Through My Hat. We'll see you there shortly. Thanks very much to Suzanne and to Nancy for your time doing this. It's been great. And thanks very much for those who've been watching and listening. We'll see you on Twitter shortly and have a great week.